Today we're going to be bringing this rather sharp looking MX-5 back to life, which is kind of par for the course here nowadays. It's all I seem to do is save cars from the scrap heap. G'day folks, my name is Brendan. It's fantastic to have you here again, where today we're looking at this NA 1.8 MX-5, which has unfortunately suffered from a dodgy keyway on the crank, and as a result the current owner has decided to replace the engine with a VVT motor. Now, while the engine swap has been mostly done, there's a few little tidbits that need to be finished off to get this thing running. And so that's why I'm here today to finish the job. I don't exactly know what I need to do yet though, so what we're going to have to do is, well, I'll grab the camera, we'll go for a bit of a walk around the car and work out what's left to do to get the thing running, and the owner's given me a big old box full of bits, so we're going to have to play with some of those as well. Hopefully we can get this done in a day or two. It shouldn't take too long, and then fingers crossed the thing will be running for the first time in about 12 months, which is exciting for me and for the owner. So let's get to work. So I think it's pertinent that first thing you do is open the bonnet and have a look at what is going on under there. Now, the owner unfortunately told me that their previous engine suffered from the keyway on the crank pulley, getting all marred up and unfortunately resulting in poor timing, which meant they had to pull the thing out, and it was going to be too fiddly to fix, and they decided to swap in this rather sharp looking VVT engine. Apparently, I think it came from a wreck or an import motor or something, and only 90,000 kilometers on the motor, which is quite low, and they've done what they needed to get it to run on the NA8 OEM factory Mazda ECU. So it's got the cam sensor in the back there. There's some connectors and things that have been swapped around. I believe it's got the NA style throttle body on the front there. But other than that, it's more or less in, but needs some finishing touches and some final attention. So from what we can see, there's obviously an exhaust missing down there. We've got some connectors and things for the intake missing. The throttle body and the whole intake manifold isn't fully connected. Obviously all the ignition work needs to be done. There's no spark plugs, nor is the NA8 ignition coils anywhere in sight. There is a missing sensor from the back of the motor there. Hopefully we've got one of those spare lying around somewhere in the box of goodies. There's no throttle cable, and there's fuel lines that need to be connected up. So there's a little bit of work here, but nothing too difficult. I don't think it would take too long to do. On top of all of that, we're going to need to do some fluids, oil, coolant, and that sort of thing. And obviously with the engine swap, the transmission had to be disconnected from the old motor and attached to the new one. Looks like the shifter needs to be reinstalled. Don't know what else needs to go on in there. Yeah, it looks okay. And also in the box of goodies over here, there's some exhaust bits in there. So some of the exhaust needs to go in, a whole heap of bolts. You can see some hoses and things. So we've got a little bit of work to do. It might be worth me getting underneath the car and having a look at what we've got, hidden away, before we go and bolt things together, just to make sure that there's nothing missing, and maybe we'll triple check all of the bolts in the gearbox and that sort of thing to make sure none of those are going to fall apart. So, looking at things under here, doesn't look too bad. There's some loose bolts there. We'll need to check on the aircon compressor. There's some loose wiring. And further along, if we squeeze down, a few more loose wires here for the gearbox, speedo, and there's the exhaust hanging there, or the cat. Something's going on there. What's that? Is that a broken stud? I can't quite. Looks like something has to happen there. Yeah, so there is a little bit of work to do down here as well, but nothing impossible. It's always a bit of a mystery when you pick up halfway through someone else's work to know exactly what needs to be done, so we'll do our best to triple check everything. So I wonder if it's worth us starting off with some of that loose wiring down there, some of these loose wires here, getting all the stuff underneath done. There's randomly loose brackets lying around and things. Getting all the stuff underneath done so that we don't have to do it later. Then we can go up top and do all the easy bits. We're gonna need some sockets and things to do up some bolts. All the hoses seem to be on okay. There's no coolant in the system yet, so we'll need to top that off as well later. Yes, alright, time to get to work. Actually, before we go and play with the car, let's have a look at all the toys that we've got to work with here. So, we've obviously got some coil packs. I don't know if we'll need these crappy hoses because there are hoses on there. I know we'll need that fella, he's missing from underneath the car. Throw that over there. There's some reasonably neatly kept bolts. And a whole collection of bits. Some ignition leads, EGR tubes. I don't know what that is, cut off alternator wiring or something. Fair enough. Over here, there's someone else's to-do list. Obviously, the exhaust heat shield, intake manifold bracket, some fuel system. Oh, there's a crank, NB crank sensor. Another. That would be the original fuel rail off the old NA8 motor. Keep in mind, so all of the VVT powered cars here in Australia got the returnless fuel rail, so there's only one feed in. You've got your damper here, but no feed out. Whereas all of our NA8s, and I believe all the MB8As got the return fuel line, so there's a fuel feed in, or fuel feed in here, through damper, or pressure regulator, and then a feed out. To run a VVT motor on an NA8 like this, the easiest thing to do is to swap in an NB8A, or the non-VVT NB fuel rail. That way you've got the return fuel rail that fits the 1.8 later 1.8 engine, and you can continue to use the feed and return lines that, like stock, makes life a lot easier. Those are the smaller rolled injectors. This thing's now running the purple VVT motor injectors down under here. So if it's using OEM ECU, that means it will probably run slightly rich because they're probably a larger injector. I can't remember exactly what size these are. The OEM purples are about 265 or something. Anyway, we've got some bolts. Some of them are even labelled, which is pretty neat. And then some of the bigger bits. Exhaust, intake, shifter boot, strut bar. That's about it. Easy. We can play with all of this, no worries. I thought it was a little unusual that the cat was left hanging loosely until I went and had a look at why, and noticed that this nut is still in it. This one was also there, but that came off reasonably easily with the rattle gun, whereas this one's well and truly stuck and it's kind of stripped out, so something tells me that that cat's there because it can't come off. So let's have a go at trying to get this fella undone. Now, while we let the bolt on the cat think about what it's done, I thought I'd have a look at the wiring here on the gearbox. And so we've got this pair of bullet connectors there and a pair of bullet connectors there, except the connector has broken off from the wire, and you can see here the stray wire there. So we're going to have to, this is for the, I can't remember if it's the reverse lights or the neutral switch. It's one of the two. It's either reverse or neutral switch that we need to disconnect this bullet, so like that, and splice it back onto its old friend up here. So we'll have to get a crimp connector, crimp it up, and then basically we can plug it back in together. This will have to loop over the top of the gearbox, not underneath, so we have to go do a bit of sort of a reach around on the gearbox to get it done. But yeah, time to get a crimp connector. We might need this in this container. Misc stuff. These little terminals, they do a good job. Good as new. Now we need to get the connectors from the other side of the gearbox over the top. We need these ones to go back over that way as well. And then they mate together on top of the box, slightly awkwardly. And now it doesn't matter which one goes to which, they're the same type of bullet connector. We just need to join them up because effectively this is just a switch, so there's no polarity in the switch or anything. Well now, look who's come to visit. Now I didn't actually need to remove this, but I did. You see, we wanted to leave it on the car, but we couldn't because these two studs and their associated nuts were pretty munted, and on the other side, the old stud there has broken off when it was removed previously. So we're going to clean up that stud somehow and get it out or replace it. Don't know. That's yeah, gonna be fun. So it actually looks like it may already have a broken drill bit or an easy out or stud remover or something already in it. So that's a worry, because it'll mean it'll be hardened and really hard to drill. Damn. Well, I've had to slot the thing out to eventually get all the drill bit out and be able to drill out the bolt. And now we've tapped it, and it's not too bad. There'll still be enough mating surface for the gasket, so we're not going to have any leak despite the big gouge due to the grinder. But thankfully we got that thing out. That was pretty horrendous. Now I've got some new stainless bolts to go in it to replace the old dodgy studs. I think these will serve okay. They're a bit long, so we're going to have to lop off the end though. Now with the cat fixed up, I think we can put this front exhaust section in and then join it to the rest of the exhaust via the catalytic converter. So first thing to do is install the O2 sensor into the bunghole. So I wanted to install the that exhaust section, except there's this bracket which on the OEM exhaust bolts up as a sort of a brace, but there's no point putting a brace in when there's a busted stud in the bolt that is supposed to hold it all together. Like, this bracket is now useless, and when changing the gearbox there was no point putting that back in there because it wasn't going to help us anyway. Now we can't tighten that up just yet because we need to install the phalange gasket. So we've got the exhaust now affixed to the engine with the new, well, fixed up cat and some fresh bolts to affix it all together. Much better. There's also a couple of bolts here missing from the sort of PPF brace to the box, so we're going to find where those have gone, and then that's pretty much all the work down this end done. We need to move up towards the engine and clean up some of the bits and pieces that will loose that end. So, first thing I think we should do is tighten up all the bolts for all of these accessories, like this aircon compressor. Probably the alternator needs some checking, and there's a few bolts and things under here that need to have a look at as well. So, time to do some tightening. Noticed the sway bar is missing some nuts or some bolts as well. Look over here. Well, that's most of the work from underneath the car done. All of the exhaust, gearbox and all of its bits. There was a bolt for the starter motor missing, so we've sorted all that out. It's now time to focus on the stuff on the top of the engine bay. And I think we'll start with the intake side. If I climb over my trailer. So down in there, there's a bunch of wires that need some attention for the starter motor, the alternator, the oil pressure switch. All of those need to have a look, need to be looked at. So we'll do that next, and then there's a bunch of wiring loom stuff here as well that you can see. We need to look at all of that. Then we'll do the throttle cable. So let's focus on this side for now. A little bit tedious getting down inside there, but nothing too difficult, hopefully. Two connectors for the alternator. Now, if you're doing a VVT swap into an NA, you want to run an NA alternator on the VVT NB motor, because the NA alternator is self-regulating while the NB alternator isn't. So on the NB ECU, the ECU controls and regulates the alternator. So when you're doing these sort of engine body swaps, if you're not swapping in an NB compatible ECU with the alternator control, you need to run an NA alternator on the NB motor. Trying to work out what was going on with the bracket in under here and why it wasn't quite where I expected it to be, and why my torch just moved. No, stay there, torch. So I noticed then that this bracket isn't bolted in properly. It's wedged in between the starter motor and the gearbox, but it's not in the hole. You can see the hole isn't where it should be, and so that bracket is just kind of jammed in there, and if we get the bracket out, or if it wiggles its way out, then all of a sudden your starter motor is going to be loose. So that bracket hasn't been installed properly. We'll have to fix it up, so we'll have to pull the starter off, get that bracket sorted, and then bolt the starter back up again. Now the starter motor wiring living here under the intake manifold, you can sort of see one of the connectors. This thing in the middle of the screen there is the oil pressure sensor. So we're just going to hook these two up. That's pretty much it for the wiring down under here. We've done the alternator now, we've fixed up the bracket for the starter, so we're just going to hook these two things up there. Fairly straightforward. Now because we're running, this is a 5-speed, the bigger, older style starter motor. There's normally a brace from that to the engine. It doesn't exist on the NB motor here, which came with a 6-speed gearbox normally, and a smaller starter motor. So because of that, the 5-speed doesn't have the extra brace attached to the back of it there, which it normally would. Got to try and remember which one's the feed and which one's the return from the body. Obviously on the fuel rail side, the feed goes into the fuel rail and then returns via the pressure dampener regulator thing. So that's easy. What I can't remember is the body side, which one of these two hard lines is feed and which is return. So I'll get underneath the car and trace it from there. Things are starting to look pretty good. Unfortunately, it's gotten dark out and I probably should stop and go inside. So we're going to stop here for today, but don't worry, we'll continue tomorrow. Well, it'll be tomorrow for me, but probably for you it'll be in a week or so, because that's usually how much time it takes me to get these things edited and published out. Anyway, thanks very much for watching. As always, you can find us at BEAVIS Motorsport, Facebook, Instagram, and all of that stuff. Stick around for next week's episode, where we'll finish off this car and hopefully get it running for the first time in about 12 months. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. I did say I was going inside, but I'll just do this one last bolt up. I can't leave it half done. You'd think it would take a little less time than this. The episode's supposed to be over. Okay, now I'm done.